Welcome to Reading the Bible with Pastor. Today, we're finishing up the book of Esther. What we had read previously was about how Mordecai, along with Esther, along with God's influence and his power and authority, had turned the wicked plan of Haman on its head. Basically, the Jews in the entire kingdom of Ahasuerus were able to defend themselves and defeat their enemies. And now they're celebrating the fact that God worked in this through Esther and Mordecai. So I want you to continue thinking about the fact that they're celebrating this victory here as we end the book of Esther, starting with verse 20 in chapter 9. And Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far. Remember, Mordecai is elevated in rank to be in the second command, basically taking over Haman's job for the king. And here in verse 21, he obliged them to keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and also the 15th day of the same year by year. That's what they were already celebrating, is this time, 14th and 15th day of the month of Adar, in the victory that they had won. Verse 22, as the days on which the Jews got relief from the enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday, they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days for sending gifts of food to one another and gifts to the poor. Now, the people were already doing this. What Mordecai was saying, we're going to put it into writing and make this an edict that you are to celebrate. You're obligated to celebrate this time. So the Jews accepted what they had started to do and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of all the Jews, who had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is, cast lots. Remember, pur is he threw dice basically to see which month and which day they were going to destroy the Jews, to crush and destroy them. But when it came before the king, he gave orders in writing that his evil plan that he had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows, that is, the sons of Haman and Haman himself. Therefore, they called these days Purim, after the term Pur. Therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, and of what they had faced in this matter, and of what had happened to them, the Jews firmly obligated themselves and their offspring, and all who joined them, that without fail they would keep these 2 days according to what was written, and at the time appointed every year, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, in every clan, province, and city, and that these days of Purim should never fall into disuse among the Jews, nor should the commemoration of these days cease among their descendants. So the idea is they decided, yes, we should absolutely celebrate this action here of we having victory over our enemies. Now, the thing to remember here is that God is acting in this. This is a secular holiday that God did not enact or obligate them to. But nonetheless, it is actually a good holiday to remember what God has done. And we do the same thing. God never told us to celebrate birthdays, but we do celebrate birthdays. It's a remembrance of what God has done. He has created you in your birthday. And we also celebrate baptismal birthdays, remembering what God has done. So these things are good to remember how God is acting in our life. Verse 29. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai, the Jew, gave full written authority, confirming this second letter about Purim. Basically, Queen Esther is adding her authority to this letter as well. Letters were sent to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, in the words of peace and truth, that these days of Purim should be observed at their appointed seasons, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther obligated them, and as they had obligated themselves and their offspring, with regard to their fasts and their lamenting. The command of Queen Esther confirmed these practices of Purim, and it was recorded in writing. Now we're getting into chapter 10, which is a very small portion of the book, and just kind of showing how things progressed from here. King Ahasuerus imposed tax on the land and on the coastlands of the sea. If you remember back at the beginning, there was no taxes on the people. And all of these events happen during this time of no taxes. Things are getting back to normal, as taxes are part of the normal process of life, that the government should be able to impose taxes to do their job that God has given them, to protect the people and to bring about justice for those who have committed crimes. And all the acts of his power and might, and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? Basically, what this is pointing out is not only these things written in this book of Esther, but they're also written in historical books elsewhere, proving that this stuff happened and to give it importance as well. For Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to the king, Ahasuerus, and he was great among the Jews and popular with a multitude of his brothers, for he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people. We end the book of Esther here. Now, as we finish this book of Esther, it is a reminder that God is working in our lives, whether we see, hear, or even speak his name. He is absolutely at work for his people, and that would be his faithful followers. The Lord is always looking out for each and every one of us, whether we're wicked or faithful. But in the end, ultimately, his will be worked for the peace of his people. And we see that on the last day, that no matter how much sin is working in our life, no matter how many evil things are going on, no matter how many wicked people there are, God will win the day, and his people will have victory. And we see that where we move from death to life. I hope that Esther is a reminder of how God works in our life, no matter what, and that it brings a bit of remembrance in your life of how God is working in you.